What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Although today I'm interviewing Fish Stark from the American Humanist Association. And just to give you a little bit of a background in case you don't know who Fish is or who the American Humanist Association is. So Fish was appointed as the executive director of the AHA in September of 2024. He's a lifelong humanist and the son of Representative Pete Stark, one of the first openly non-theist members of Congress, and the 2008 Humanist of the Year. He brings significant experience to this role at the AHA. His professional background includes leading teams at global nonprofits, tech startups, and political campaigns. And he's got degrees from Harvard, Yale, where he served on the board of the Student Humanist Group. So, hi, Fish. How you doing?
Hey, it is good to be here, John, and thanks to everyone who's tuning in. I'm doing all right. It's been a little bit of a wild week. I started out my week with my team at Trump's fake Religious Liberty Commission, which is you would think a Religious Liberty Commission would represent some of the 30% of Americans who are non-religious, but instead it was 9 Christian nationalists, 1 right-wing rabbi, and they didn't have room for any of us, but they did have room for Dr. Phil. So I started my week staging a walkout there, and it's only gotten a little crazier since then. But it's good to after spending some time in the belly of the beast, good to get some time with my fellow heathens and just talk. So yeah, like you said, it's almost a year now running the AHA, which is sort of a blip on the radar screen. AHA has been around for 85 years. We do 2 things. Number one, we promote humanism as a positive belief system for the tens of millions of Americans who don't believe in a God to belong to and believe in. And the second thing is we fight the religious right like hell in Congress and the courts. So super psyched to talk about the work that we're doing and just excited to be on with you. It was awesome meeting you at Free Flow a couple months ago.
Oh yeah, that was great. I love meeting you too. Like I at first I was like, who is this guy? He seems important. And then I figured out who you were, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I don't think I've actually met anybody from the AHA before. And to be honest, like I've heard of the American Humanist Association, and I've heard of humanism. Obviously, I consider myself a secular humanist, but I've never really heard a lot about like what the organization does and what what y'all actually fight for. Because like a lot of the things that you just mentioned right there, like I feel like people would normally associate with like Freedom from Religion Foundation or the American Atheists. Like I think they would associate with them with that, but I don't think that they've, at least in my experience, they haven't. I haven't at least associated y'all with like doing a lot of legal work as far as challenging these very Christian laws and stuff.
Right. Well, part of the challenge, honestly, to just give it to you straight, is that like AHA's social media game, like ground game has been weak for a while. But we actually, even just in the past 10 years, we've sued the religious right all the way to the Supreme Court. We established the Congressional Free Thought Caucus in our conference room. So do you know about the Congressional Free Thought Caucus? Yes, that was like, so in our conference room in 2018, we got together Jared Huffman, who is the second open atheist in Congress after my dad, and Jerry McNerney, Dan Kildee, and Jamie Raskin, and like my predecessor, Roy Speckhart. Like they all worked together on this idea, like what if there was a caucus in Congress, just like there's a prayer caucus for people who believe in free thought? People of all faiths who believe in secular government, separation of church and state, and that religious liberty in America has to include everyone, but especially it has to include people who are non-religious. And so we started that back in 2018, and now it's like one of the fastest growing caucuses in Congress since the inauguration. We've added 10 new members. So the AHA has 17 full-time staff. We've been around for 85 years. We've done a lot of really deep work in Congress and the courts. We're not really that great at talking about it, and that's part of the things that I've been trying to change since I stepped into this role 10 months ago.
Yeah. I think that you're doing a great job of, for one, reaching out, because AHA reached out to me to have you on to talk about some of the important work that y'all are doing, and I'm really excited about that. I do want to start off by talking a little bit about the AHA's, like, I guess, it as an organization. So, like, when you were appointed as executive director, you had stated that humanism is about respecting the limitless worth and dignity of every person, lifting people up and protecting everyone's right to think and live freely. And I'm wondering, how does that does this humanist philosophy inform the AHA's approach to church-state separation cases?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So humanism ultimately is the belief system of America's greatest rebels, right? From people at the founding, like Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine, to people like Frederick Douglass and A. Philip Randolph, who led the charge for civil rights in America, to people like Steve Wozniak and Jonas Salk and Albert Einstein, who like invented things that we rely on every day, to people like Kristen Bell and Quinta Brunson, who are changing the frontiers of TV right now. Humanism ultimately is a philosophy that has inspired people to make incredible change, because when you start from a position that, number one, nobody is coming to save us, we've got to do this ourselves. Number two, people matter, and they matter inherently and limitlessly without needing to be saved or redeemed. And number three, like, there's no unfalsifiable authority. There's no tradition to guide us. Like, we are responsible for learning what is true and figuring out the way to make good things real every day. You end up getting people who do really awesome stuff. And so when we think about our approach to church-state separation, like, our belief is that humans have incredible potential. There's no problem we can't solve, no truth we can't uncover, but that only happens if we live in free societies. And the challenge is that there's always been a contingent of people in America since the founding who have felt that America should be a religious country, that we should have a state religion, that we should promote the rights of religious people over the rights of non-religious people, right? And this is not what the founders intended. They were very explicit about this, but there's always been this group of people who believe, I heard this at the Religious Liberty Commission, who believe deep in their hearts that the only way to have a good country is for it to be a religious country, because they believe the only way for people to be good is for them to be religious. And our job is to simply say, no, like, we don't believe that the only way to have a good country is people being non-religious. We think that what we need is a country where everyone has the freedom of religion and belief, and people have the ability to decide for themselves the values and principles that guide their life. So our goal is to, anytime we see the religious right trying to push something through the courts or through legislatures that would prescribe for other people what they're supposed to believe, that would paternalistically say, hey, your beliefs are stupid, and actually you need to adopt our very narrow set of Christian conservative values, we're always going to stand against that, because ultimately, again, our belief is that people flourish when they're free.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. I mean, I have very much always been in favor of, like, that whole philosophy, because a lot of people think that atheists, they just want to subject religious people to, like, their whims and everything like that. And it's like, I spend so much time, trying to talk to people and try to relay, like, look, it's fine for you to believe whatever you want to believe. I don't have a problem with that. It's when you start infringing on other people's freedoms, other people's, life, that I start to have a problem with your religious, sensibilities.
Exactly. Some of the best, smartest, kindest people I know in my life personally are deeply religious, right? Like, I don't want a world where everyone thinks the way I do. That's not what humanists want. Like, I want to live in a country where there are people like me, and there are Christians, and there are Jews, and there are Muslims, right? Like, it's good to have different beliefs about the world and metaphysics and how it works, in my opinion. I just don't want a country where I'm a second-class citizen, or any of us are considered to be second-class citizens, right? Like, I don't know, like, if there's, if somebody wants to put a Jesus fish bumper sticker on their car, it leads to a lot of good puns on my name, so it doesn't offend me. But when people want to use my tax dollars to push their religion on other people's kids, that's when I start to have a fucking problem. And I think that we've got to do a better job in the secular community broadly. I say that mostly as like a recognition of where we're trying to move things to the AHA, of being really clear, hey, our church-state separation advocacy work, it's not about telling religious people we don't want them to be religious in public. It's about saying that our government needs to be a neutral space where everyone's on equal ground. That if you're using our tax dollars, you can't promote somebody's religion over somebody else's.
Yeah, totally. Now, so I'm kind of curious, as far as, being the head of, or the executive director of the AHA, what do you see as the most pressing threats to the church-state separation in today's socioeconomic climate? And also, how is the AHA responding to these challenges?
So here's the deal. We had a really bad time in November of 2024. We let a president be elected who's surrounded by people who want to push an explicitly Christian nationalist agenda on the country, right? Now, I think we all know Trump's not really religious. And he's surrounded by a lot of people who I like to call atheist theocrats, right? Like Jordan Peterson. You saw Jordan Peterson just went on Jubilee and they're like, well, you're a Christian. He's like, oh, I'm not really a Christian, right? Like Jordan Peterson's like kind of an atheist. There was this profile of Curtis Yarvin in the New Yorker a couple of weeks ago who like is the blogger that JD Vance and Peter Thiel and a bunch of other people listen to. He's like, he is an atheist who thinks more people should be religious. And if you listen to JD Vance, who says he was an atheist until 2019, and then he converted to Catholicism. When he talks about converting to Catholicism, he doesn't even talk about God. Like he talks about the fact that he converted to Catholicism because it was really old and because he thinks that old traditions are a good way for you to live your life. Like Donald Trump is surrounded by people who don't believe in God, but think you should be religious because they think you're an animal who needs to be controlled. And they think religion, if everyone else is religious, like that's the only way people will behave. These people have no other mechanism for thinking about how to make society better than top-down control, which is the opposite of humanists who believe that actually society is better the freer we are and the more able we are to flourish. So here's what they're doing. They're doing a couple things. I was at this Religious Liberty Commission meeting this week, right? And this commission is going to make recommendations on July 4th of next year, our 250th anniversary, to Trump and to the Attorney General and to people in Congress. And we kind of got a sneak peek of what they're going to say because you have people like Ben Carson being like, religion gives us morals, and imagine living in a society with no morals. And you had them bring people before the commission who said the government should, I'm going to pull up my phone so I have my actual notes I was taking during the meeting, because like some of this stuff, you've got to hear it directly from the horse's mouth because it is really, really terrifying too. That like the commission started with a prayer that concluded in Jesus's holy name. And it said, our country, which is based on the acknowledgement that our rights and freedoms come from you, which like, no, the hell they don't if you've ever read the founders. But they specifically were saying that we need to get to a tradition of public recognition of truths about divine reality. Now, what that means is they want the government explicitly to say that God is real, religion is important, and everyone should be religious. Like they talked about it. And Dr. Phil, who was on the commission, was like, well, wait a minute. You don't mean that we're telling people to be religious. You just mean we're telling people it's okay to, they have the freedom to be religious or not, right? And like, because he didn't get the memo. And they were like, no, that's not what we want. We actually want the government to be promoting religion as a thing that people should do. So they are trying to lay the groundwork to say, yes, the government should be leading prayer in schools. Yes, the president should be talking about the fact that our country is a Christian country. Yes, the government should be promoting being religious. And downstream of that, what they mean is more social services should be run by religious organizations, not the government. And more of our schools should be run by religious organizations, not the government. Now, what we know is that is a one-way ticket to discrimination against religious minorities. It is also a massive giveaway to the religious right because it's sending a lot of money and a lot of jobs their way. And mostly, again, it's creating a crappy bifurcated system where we take money out of public schools or we take money out of social services and we give it to religious organizations who do not do as good of a job. Like, if you look up what happens when a kid gets a voucher to go to a religious private school, there was one study that showed in 1 year they lose the equivalent of 68 days of learning. Their agenda is to make kids dumber, make our social services worse, and create a world where there are two tiers of people. One, the Christian conservatives who think like them, and two, everyone else, because what they want is a religious country, and they're not going to stop until they get it.
Yeah, I'm really shocked that Dr. Phil was in this meeting. Like, I mean, I know that Dr. Phil has been a bit on the like in the political sphere, like in the Trump administration and everything like that, but I didn't realize that he was on this religious liberty committee or commission. It's a commission, right?
Yeah, Religious Liberty Commission, which is, the president appoints commissions all the time, right? Like, and frankly, like, a religious liberty commission isn't necessarily a bad idea, right? I'm for religious liberty, you're for religious liberty. But the challenge is when you've got a religious liberty commission that doesn't represent the religious diversity of America, and where they're explicitly talking about things that have nothing to do with religious liberty. I'll give you another example. In the opening remarks, they had one woman who was on the commission. Her entire qualification was being like a Miss America runner-up, right? Like, Trump also just surrounds himself with people who can't win shit, right? Like, he's like, oh, we're taking over the Kennedy Center and we're putting in Adam Carolla, who came in 15th on Trump's own reality show. And he's like, oh, to talk about trans people in sports, we're taking this woman who came in like tied for 5th in a swim race. I was like, and so, yeah, the Miss America runner-up was there. And she talked about the fact that 100 years ago, we used to teach children to read out of, she called it the New England Primer, which was basically a textbook that taught elementary school kids how to read and write, that was full of lessons about Christianity. And she said, that wasn't indoctrination, that was formation. And so these people's definition of religious liberty is unintelligible to anyone who actually understands the term religious liberty, because they think that in an environment where we have religious liberty, the government is teaching Christianity to children with your tax dollars, that is perfectly compatible with religious liberty. But if you tell a Christian who runs a business you can't fire somebody for being gay, that apparently is an attack on religious liberty.
Yeah, and that doesn't, like, here's one thing that gets me about Christian nationalists, and I know that this is like apologists just in general, but like taking the comment by the Miss was it Miss Universe runner-up, the
Miss America runner-up.
Miss America runner-up. I mean, 100. So if we were to go back 100 years, that's isn't that prior to like anything resembling our modern school system, like and the protections that are levied upon it?
Well, they hate our modern school system because our modern school system was designed by a guy named John Dewey, who was a humanist and one of the original signers of the Humanist Manifesto and a founder of the AHA, right? Like, and it was the reason that our schools like look better than they did 100 years ago was because John Dewey was like, hey, rather than making kids like all sit in rows all the time and like only learn to memorize shit, like maybe they'll actually become more productive, in our economy and also better citizens if we teach them how to figure out things for themselves rather than giving them the answers. If we help them like learn how to break things down and come up with solutions on their own. And that was a big revolution in American education. It transformed it from like a system of rote memorization to a system where kids were actually taught how to construct knowledge. And he came to that because of his humanist beliefs, right? His idea that top-down like systems don't work to teach learning or morality, that people are capable and that they learn from experience with each other, not by like being told some ultimate truth. And so that's the basis on which our education system changed. And the corrupt and they want to throw it out.
Sorry, you had frozen up, at least on my end. I'm not sure right there at the end. But yeah, so I think that's that's a one of the things I was trying to get to is the fact that they regularly just either throw information out or they just totally ignore facts about history in order to make their arguments for these things. Like, I mean, I'm no expert on the school system, but I've done enough research into it to know the different nuances and how our school system developed and why it was problematic before and why we have the protections that are, it baked into our school system now. So it's like, I don't understand why they would want to go back to that, because it was not atheists that initially had a problem with how the school system was treating kids.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. These people just make things up. I'm pretty sure it was the same lady who said, "In God we trust on all of our currency." These are words our founding fathers used. And it was like, no, the hell they're not. "In God we trust" got added to the currency in 1956. Like, these people, and it's unclear, you can't always tell when you're dealing with the religious right, like who is dumb and who is mendacious, right? But like, these people are willing to use any kind of lie to advance their cause. You even had them talking about the founders, right? You had one of them quoted George Washington's Newport letter to a Jewish congregation that he wrote in the second year of his presidency. They were basically asking about religious liberty in America. And they quoted it selectively, but the whole thing has Washington saying, "The United States of America, which gives to intolerance no sanction and gives bigotry no respite, requires nothing of requires nothing of the people who live there except that they conduct themselves as good citizens." He was very clear. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter if you have a religion at all. The United States of America is a place where everyone is treated equally and there's not favor shown to any form of belief or non-belief. And this was from someone who is deeply religious himself. But you've got them very, very committed to telling their own version of history. But that's not how history works, right? You can't make up your own version. It already happened.
Yeah, and during this meeting that you were at, did they at all mention how to get around the First Amendment or the protections of religious liberty in the First Amendment?
So interestingly, their plan to get around the First Amendment has always been, we're going to pack the Supreme Court, we're going to get the court we want, and then we're going to tell them what to do. And you even had one of the people, and I'm going to find this in my notes, you had the guy who said very clearly, it was like he was giving an instruction. He said, the Supreme Court has been dancing around the edge of this idea for all this time, and they should just go ahead and do it. He said the Supreme Court has done everything but say something it has yet to say and should say, which is that promoting religion for the sake of religion and its benefits to the polity is fine. So their goal has always been to get their people in the Supreme Court and get the Supreme Court to issue a ruling that says, hey, the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, all it says is that there shouldn't be a state church. It doesn't say that the government shouldn't promote religion. That's the interpretation of the First Amendment they want, and they think they're going to get it.
So maybe, I mean, I'm obviously no legal expert or nothing, but as far as my reading of the First Amendment goes, it says that the United States shall not make a law in favor of me paraphrasing, in favor of religion or against religion. So in order for I get the whole no state or no U.S. church or nothing, no church designated as the U.S. church, but in order to enforce any kind of religious denomination or any kind of religiosity on its people, it would have to pass laws, which would there be violating the First Amendment, right? I feel like this is pretty much just being, literate and reading the First Amendment.
Right. Well, it's Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Right? Mm-hmm. That's very, very clear. In my view, that says really clearly the government should be neutral on all matters of religion. Everyone has the freedom to practice as they choose, right? As it should be. But the government does not get involved. Now, you could, if you were on the far right, you could read that differently. They say, oh, respecting an establishment of religion just means the government shouldn't establish a state religion. I don't think that's what the founders meant. I think it's very clearly not what the founders meant, because Thomas Jefferson was very clear. He said, the ideas of men are not a legitimate object of government, government intervention, right? They are not something the state should care about. People's religion, people's belief system, that's not a place where the government should involve itself. And James Madison was really clear that, and Madison considered himself a Christian, but he said, hey, wait a minute, like, if we want to protect religious freedom for Christians, we need to make sure that the same freedom is extended to people who aren't convinced by the same evidence as us. And he said, if this freedom is abused, it is an offense against God. Like, the founders believed that, like, the state making religious declarations was a threat to Christianity, not just people who didn't believe, because they all fled from Europe, where there were state religions, where there was preference given to religion. And what they saw is all that did was lead to caste systems, oppression, and closed-mindedness. And so they wanted this breadth of religious liberty. What you see the far right doing is, they want to advance this interpretation of the First Amendment that's really narrow and says, well, as long as there's no state religion, the government can do whatever it wants. And they try to get around this by, rather than passing laws, just going and doing what they want, right? So I know we'll talk about this some, but like, some people might know, we successfully sued and won this year against the city of Ocala, Florida, which they didn't pass a law. They just went ahead and hosted a public Christian prayer vigil with taxpayer dollars. And so a lot of what you're seeing is people who are going and just doing it and daring us to sue them, and then trying to get the Supreme Court to weigh in their favor. Now, in our case, we got a Bush-appointed judge to rule in our favor and say, no, actually, like, a city government can't plan and orchestrate and invite people to and host a prayer event with taxpayer dollars, because that is very clearly a straight up violation of the First Amendment, and so you've still got people, even people who are on the right, who are willing to hold the line, but you're also seeing people really try to use the structural advantages that the far religious right has in our government right now to push a country that would be unrecognizable to anyone who believes in freedom of religion.
Right. Now, I realize that maybe your answer might be a bit speculative to my next question here, and it's a little bit off script. But as far as this Religious Liberty Commission goes, what actionable steps do you see, like, the Trump administration taking, like, as far as to make good on what this commission has said, and what you've relayed here so far?
It's a good question. I think you could see a couple things happen, right? Trying to predict what these nutcases are going to do is like, it's like trying to predict the weather in Florida, right? Like, there's kind of no rhyme or reason to it sometimes. But here are some of the things that they signaled really clearly. I think one thing that's really clearly going to come down the pike is this commission is going to recommend that the United States government treat promoting religion as a public good, that they have the president and members of Congress and mayors and governors saying more and more religious things and encouraging people to be religious and bringing displays of faith into more and more public spaces. And they are going to seek court rulings that rule in their favor. That's number one. But the more pernicious things are, they are going to seek more and more religious exemptions to the laws that we all follow, right? So there was that Supreme Court case, Catholic Charities, where basically these Catholic-run charities in Wisconsin were saying, well, there's a state law that says religious organizations shouldn't have to pay unemployment tax for their employees, and we're a religious organization, so we shouldn't have to pay unemployment tax. And you're going to see more and more religious organizations, maybe dubiously religious organizations, right? You could say, let's say I run a company that, I don't know, sells go-karts, and I could find religion one day. I could decide I'm very, very Christian and decide, you know what, to save some money on my healthcare plan, I'm going to stop offering birth control. And, to save some money on unemployment insurance, I'm just going to call this a religious company. We sell Christian go-karts now. And I'm going to stop paying into the state unemployment insurance system. I mean, they want a world where laws are, where people can pick and choose to follow the law based on their religion, which is a great way to poke giant holes in the social safety net that everybody relies on and allow for rampant discrimination against queer people, people of color, who, non-theists, whatever, by anyone who calls themselves religious. And the final thing that I think we're going to see them recommend, and I think we're going to see the Trump administration trying to do, is move more and more administration of education and social services to religious organizations. So they believe, and there was somebody on the commission who said, it used to be that the government wasn't so big because charity was taken care of by the church. This is what they believe, that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, a lot of these right-wing religious nuts believe there's no reason the government should be providing these things. The church should be providing these things because it's their role and it makes them stronger. Now, let's set aside the fact that, for instance, when churches try to provide health insurance, I don't know if you've heard of healthcare sharing ministries, but healthcare sharing ministries, they pay out a fraction of the claims that real health insurance does. And when you call them and you're like, hey, I need help with this hospital bill, they say, I'll pray for you. And so that's the kind of quality we can expect to see if our Medicare and Medicaid get outsourced to the church. And they want to do it, as we know, with education too. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to see. Exemptions from laws, public promotion of religion, and shifting things that should be done by the government to being done by the church.
So, how long do you think it'll be before the religious people start fighting amongst themselves because of like all the different denominations? And of course, there are other religions, which I know that they're just going to dismiss the other religions. But I mean, even within Christianity, there's so many denominations out there that have different ideas about how things should be done and everything like that. Like, do you think that that's ever gonna be like a big problem for them, like a big hurdle, or do you think that they're just gonna go along with it? With whoever makes the rules?
I think it's going to be a huge problem. I think these guys are sitting on a house of cards, and the question is, how much damage can they do before it gets knocked down, right? Like, let's start with the obvious. Like, this is not something that most religious people want. Most religious people don't agree with the basic premise that religion is the only way that you can have virtuous people in a good society, right? 2/3 of Americans and a majority of religious people believe you can be a good person whether or not you believe in God. And 85% of Americans believe the separation of church and state is a core American value. They might interpret separation of church and state differently, but they don't have the disdain for it. I mean, you had people on that stage saying we need to kick in the rotten door of separation between church and state. They said church-state separation is not a real American value because it's French. They said Thomas Jefferson wrote it because he was influenced by the French, and therefore church-state separation is not American. And so, like, most religious people don't have the level of disdain that these people do for church-state separation, either because they believe that, like, yeah, no, this is what I believe, but everyone should have the freedom to believe something different, or they're like, wait a minute, like, if we don't have church-state separation, yeah, maybe my people are in power now, but how do I know somebody's not gonna get elected who has a different religion and is going to be nasty about it? So they do not hold as many of the cards as they think they do. There are religious people, and this is why when you see school voucher programs go on the ballot, even in red states like Kentucky, they fail because even very religious people aren't willing to sell out the quality of their public schools so religious institutions can make a buck. But the other thing is that, yeah, you're right. It's these interdenominational conflicts that I think are going to split the whole thing apart. As an example, they couldn't find anyone who wasn't a Christian or a Jew to be on this commission, right? There are all of these minor religions in the US that they're totally ignoring who are going to get upset about this at some point. And remember, you've got a bunch of like right-wing Protestants who think Catholics are going to hell, right? Like even within the Christian coalition, there are going to be some fissures. And you saw that when Dr. Phil went off the script at the commission and was like, well, interrupted the chair to be like, wait a minute. Like, I don't think this is what we're here for. We're not talking about the government promoting religion. And everyone was like, yes, we are, and shut him down. So I think that ultimately, our job as a secular community, and it's like the media is not covering this. right? Like, this was not on CNN. This was not written about in Politico or the New York Times or the Washington Post. This was a meeting in a very small auditorium at the Museum of the Bible, and there was maybe one person from USA Today there. I don't even know if they put out an article. They are doing this under the cover of night because they know this is not what Americans want. Like, this separate anti-Christian bias commission that Trump has, 78% of Americans oppose it. There was a poll because even a majority of Christians are like, it's not that people support anti-Christian bias. They're like, this isn't a problem in America. Can we do something about the cost of living rather than this? So our job, I think, as a secular community is to bang the drum as loud as we can and be like, have you seen this nonsense that's happening? Because a majority of Americans, plenty of people who voted for Trump, did not vote for him because of shit like this. 4% of people were strongly supportive of Project 2025. And if we can make clear, and we're the ones who can do this better than anyone else in the country because it affects us the most, if we can make clear that this administration is focused on total nonsense like this, rather than getting the prices of gas and eggs and housing down for working Americans, you're going to see a lot of people turn on this movement real fast.
Yeah. And, speaking of, all these religious organizations out there and, their attacks on the separation of church and state, I'm kind of curious, does the AHA currently work with like religious groups and to support, this fight against the demolishing of the church state separation? And or is it becoming harder to find like religious groups or anybody to build those kind of bridges with?
Totally. We'll work with anybody who shares our values. So, like, as an example, we are working right now, our policy team is working on like, oh shoot, there's a bunch of states that are trying to make it so that religious chaplains can work in public schools. And I will say, like, the AHA, humanism has Supreme Court recognition as a religion, right? Like, not all humanists consider themselves religious. And of course, we don't mean religion in the like, we believe in God sense. It's like, okay, religion is a social technology where people come together to decide what they believe and like solve problems. And humanism can be considered a religion in that sense. So we have humanist chaplains that we certify who work in schools, like colleges where people are adults who can make decisions on their own, and prisons and hospitals. But like, we don't think that chaplains should be in public school. You know who else doesn't think there should be public school chaplains? A lot of liberal Christian groups, a lot of Jewish groups, a lot of Muslim and Sikh groups. And so we're at these tables and we're on these planning calls talking about how to defeat these bills with Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus who say, sure, I believe in my religion, but I don't think it should be pushed on kids in public school. And actually, since the election, I think you've seen more religious organizations come out of the woodwork and say, no, this isn't what we want, and we actually have to stand against this as part of our public policy work. And as another example, we work with plenty of organizations that are not even religious at all, but align with us on these issues, right? This isn't just about people's religious status. Like, we talked about healthcare sharing ministries, right? So we introduced in 4 different states bills to regulate healthcare sharing ministries this legislative session. We didn't say, oh, you can't have a healthcare sharing ministry. We said, hey, if you're trying to sell a healthcare sharing ministry to people, you have to be clear. It's not insurance. It's not required to pay out any claims. It doesn't cover these things you might expect it to cover, like therapy or medication or primary care, which are the things most people use their health insurance for. And when we did that, we were working with like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, right? Like, we were working with consumer protection groups. There are groups of people coming together irrespective of religion who don't like the idea that religious organizations can just exempt themselves out of basic consumer protection or tax or like worker rights provisions, because they don't want a world where, these guys can basically go and play by their own set of rules and, take money out of people's pockets in the process. So yeah, that coalition is big and getting bigger. And we have to, if we want to win, we have to realize that like, we live in a country where the majority of people are religious, right? Like, if you want to separate out America by who believes in God and who doesn't, you and I are the minority, and that's okay. But if you separate America out by people who believe in humanist values, people who believe that everyone should have the freedom of conscience, people who believe church and state should be separate, people who believe we should treat people decently, then we're the majority. And it's only a matter of time between this temporary alliance between, and this is the weakest point, right? Forget the factional stuff in Christianity. The governing coalition that we have now is a bad alliance of billionaires who believe in the supremacy of wealth, like religious fanatics who believe in the supremacy of religion, and bigots who believe in white supremacy. And even though those three groups of people don't always agree, the billionaires are like, oh, we'll just let the religious people make whatever laws they want, because ultimately, if I want gender affirming care for my kid, I can fly them to Europe to get it, right? Or if I want to get gay married, no one's going to stop me because I have a ton of money, right? The billionaires are going to let the religious right do whatever they want because they think they can live their lives however they want, and these rules are just going to be for normal people. At a certain point, there are going to be cracks that form in that alliance because these billionaires, like Elon Musk, is an atheist. He doesn't want what Timothy Dolan wants. And Timothy Dolan isn't as concerned with Elon Musk about like busting union strikes at the Tesla factory. So ultimately, we are going to get to this point, I think, where you're going to start seeing big fissures in the coalition. And that's when it's going to matter that we have been doing this work for years alongside liberal religious people who say, yeah, maybe we believe something different than you about what's in the sky, but we don't want a right-wing religious takeover of our government either.
Yeah. Now, I do want to kind of go back to the Ocala decision, or the Ocala case, rather, not decision, but the Ocala case. And I'm just kind of curious. I don't know how much you know about any of the legal strategies or any of the points that were made during that case in order to get that victory, but I'm kind of curious if you can kind of run through that and also maybe state how that could inform like future AHA litigation on these types of cases.
Totally. And so this is why it's really important that we have institutions like the AHA doing this work, right? This case took 10 years. It took 10 years to get to a decision and get it settled. And we had multiple different lawyers working on the case over the course of that time, right? Like the truth is, the way the religious right got to where they are right now is they spent decades doing like recruiting people to run for school board who are now in Congress now, right? Like, and working up these obscure legal theories that got defeated 100 times before they finally got accepted, and like looking into the most obscure regulations and tweaking them. And so like, we've got to play the long game in the same way they did if we want to win. And that's exactly what the AHA is set up to do. And so the way we built this case over the years, like we were aware when it happened, we got our plaintiffs together. And what we did was we just kept focusing on the facts, right? The facts are that, and like, ultimately, I don't care if a Baptist church hosts a prayer vigil and the mayor shows up, right? Like the mayor can do what he wants on his own time. If the mayor wants to go to a community event where they're praying and I support you and I'll pray along with you, fine. We wanted to make sure we were really clear that our issue was not that the mayor or the police chief were themselves religious or that they were talking about their faith, which is whatever, but that the city was the one that decided they want to host the event. The city was the one that planned the event, orchestrated the event, promoted the event, ran the event, told city employees to be at the event, used religious language on city letterhead in its communications promoting the event. And we basically got a Bush-appointed judge to say, hey, look, like it's, maybe the city had good intentions, but this, when you look at this fact pattern, this is extreme. Like you cannot use all of these resources to promote religion. That is wrong. And that was exactly what we wanted written down in print, that the things that the city did all taken together were not constitutional because it is simply not an appropriate use of taxpayer resources to promote religion in that way. And so when we got that ruling, we were willing to go to them and say, hey, sure, you could appeal this to the next circuit and it would take both of us a lot more money and a lot more time. Or are you willing to accept the ruling as it is now and let that stay on the books and say, you did something wrong and we'll leave you alone? And I think that they were worried that they were going to lose on appeal, and so they accepted it. And for us, that's a win, because that means in federal law now, there is precedent that says if you were a city, you cannot use taxpayer resources to host a religious vigil in this way. And hopefully that precedent also applies to other, religious events that cities may want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this would be an integral thing, an integral part of litigating, future violations of this nature. Because I mean, very obviously, it violates the First Amendment, and they shouldn't be doing it. But I think that it could definitely be like something that's regularly cited, and I hope that it is, because I do think that is something that needs to be challenged. And so I guess, would you say that one of the things that, just, I guess, people that are on the ground, like in the cities, and not necessarily doing the activist work necessarily like either of us do, would you say that the best way that they can help out is that, like, basically see something, say something? Like, if you see some kind of violation, definitely bring it up, or definitely challenge it?
Yes. If you see a violation, report it to us right away. Like, we have people on staff. It is our job to fight for your rights. That is literally what I go out and raise money every day to do. So if you see something in your city that is wrong, or especially if something happens to you, right? The challenge right now is that the Establishment Clause arguments that we won under in Ocala are becoming harder and harder to make because of a conservative judiciary, right? It's harder to say, oh, we're protesting use of taxpayer funds to host this religious observance, because they'll say, oh, well, you're just an offended observer and you don't have any standing. But what we still have on our side, and what is a big issue, civil rights law. You can't discriminate against someone on the basis of religion, right? And that includes discriminating against someone because they're a humanist or an atheist or otherwise secular. But it happens all the time, right? Like, we know this. Like, people get fired from their jobs for saying they're atheist, right? People get discriminated against in housing or healthcare or education. That's especially what we want to hear about. So if something has happened to you where you feel like you've been discriminated against because of your beliefs, like, report it to us. We have an amazing legal director we just brought in from Compassion and Choices, which is the organization that fights around the country to give everybody access to death with dignity. We've got an amazing team. But like, what we need for every case we bring, we probably get 30 or 40 reports, because not everything that somebody thinks is illegal is actually illegal. Not everything that somebody thinks is a good case is a good case. But that's why you should tell us no matter what, because, like, let us make that decision. If you're not sure, oh, is this something that would be a violation or not, tell us about it, and we can help you decide, and we can be there and support you if you want to say, no, I want to fight for my rights.
Yeah, definitely. And so how, if somebody needed to report something to the AHA, how would they go about doing that?
AmericanHumanist.org. We've got a report a violation portal on our website. I don't know. Can I add to the chat? I don't know how this works. Yeah, I
don't know. We've had to turn off everybody doing it. If you want to comment first in the chat, I can definitely give you a wrench so that you can post it, or I can give my wife, she can actually post it in the chat too.
We are lucky to have good people around us. Okay, so
yeah.
Here's I tell you what people should do if they want to report a violation, because this will reach us directly, is to email us at legal@americanhumanist.org, right? And again, not every violation is something that we can do a lawsuit around, but some of them are. And we have them, and their whole job is to listen, to talk to you about what's happening, and to help you understand, is this something where your rights have been violated, and can we do anything about it? And if we can, we want to.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm putting that in the email right there in the live chat on YouTube. And so that's legal@americanhumanist.org for anybody that's watching that can't see the chat or anything like that. If you think that there's a violation, even if you're not sure, definitely consider sending in a request or something for that. because I think that, everybody should be, see something, say something, like, especially considering, what's going to be happening or what could potentially be coming up. I think that's a really great resource to have there. Yeah, and then my wife actually put the reporting link in the chat too on YouTube, so I'll be sure to get those in any of the notes that we have for the interview here. So as far what? Oh, okay. Apparently, it says that y'all aren't currently accepting violation submissions at this time.
That must be an old page or a dead link, because we are absolutely accepting violations right now. So that's why I gave you the email, because I looked for it and I found that old dead page too. So email the email, and I'm gonna figure out why that was the page I found and where the real one is.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Well, we got both resources in the chat there, just in case, like, if in the future somebody needs the link too. But in any case, so that was the win in Ocala, and I think that's an awesome win, and I definitely appreciate all of AHA's hard work on doing that. But there's a few other coming Supreme Court cases, right, that you guys are involved in. And I guess the first one that I was wanting to talk about is the St. Isidore v. Drummond, which I think that's already been handed down, and it was a tie, right?
That was, and thank God, we were so worried we were going to lose St. Isidore v. Drummond. So basically, here's what happened with St. Isidore. There was a charter school, in a religious school in Oklahoma, that wanted to start as a public charter school, meaning it would be a public school that got taxpayer dollars to operate. And it was at the Republican Attorney General of Oklahoma. This is why we can't assume who our allies are and aren't, right? This is why we can't assume that it's just us against the world, because it was a Republican elected official in Oklahoma who sued to stop it and say, no, this is going too far. We cannot have a religious public school in Oklahoma. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, because the Oklahoma court was like, no, this is ridiculous. And they sued again. And the Supreme Court decided it in a 4-4 decision. How does that happen when there are 9 members of the Supreme Court? Well, it turns out that Amy Coney Barrett, one of the conservative justices, had to recuse herself because of her personal involvement with the school and that movement. The fact that she personally is involved with the school and people surrounding the school kind of tells you all you need to know about how she might vote, but at least she had the sense and the ethics to say, it's not right for me to vote on this one. So we were really, really happy that, we think it was John Roberts decided to side with the liberal justices on the court, and it got blocked. They didn't release an opinion. So we don't know what they actually thought about it or what their arguments were. The worry is that they're planning to bring another religious charter school case on which Coney Barrett could vote in the next few years. But at least between now and then, we've given ourselves a reprieve where we don't have to worry about people starting religious charter schools and states being required to fund them.
I'm just now thinking of this, and this was something that I foresaw, like, after or when Trump got voted in the first time in 2016. But are you, especially with me being in Alabama, are you worried about these Republicans and these organizations that are deliberately doing these things to surface them to SCOTUS so that they can get those kind of rulings?
Yes, well, that's one of the things we're worried about in our day-to-day work. That's why sometimes people will be like, why aren't you suing Pete Hegseth for hosting these prayer vigils at the Department of Defense? It's like, Pete Hegseth wants us to sue us for hosting these prayer vigils at the Department of Defense because he thinks the Supreme Court will rule in his favor, right? So we're being really thoughtful about the cases we take. We're doing things in state courts. It's not that we're only taking things that we think will win, because sometimes you have to take cases where you know you're going to lose because it's the right thing to do. But if we think that it's the far right trying to bait us into taking a case where it will establish bad precedent, we won't do it, right? The AHA is very selective in how it takes cases and strategic, which is why we're not always the flashy name that you see associated with things. So yeah, I would say you're going to see people testing boundaries where they know there's going to be an issue. And the thing to do there is have a strong, coordinated public response that makes very clear what our issue is. And again, I think the strongest arguments we have are not, we think it's offensive for people to be religious in public, but we think it's offensive for our taxpayer dollars to be used to promote a religion we don't believe in. Because everyone else can see that and think, oh yeah, I guess I'm a Christian. I wouldn't want my tax dollars used to hold a Jewish service or a satanic temple service, right? And so that's important. And the other thing is schools is for those of us who are parents to talk about the fact that we believe nobody should be teaching our kids about their religion using our tax dollars, right? Like a lot of conservatives make the argument that, you know, having religion in public schools is about parents being able to direct the moral formation of their children, which is nonsense because nothing violates my right to direct the moral formation of my children more than my tax dollars being used to teach my children a religion I don't believe in their public school. So they use all this rhetoric. They don't mean any of it. What they want is not parents having the right to control their children's moral development, which they already do at home. They want to push their right-wing Christian religion on kids and call it freedom. So what we've got to do is make those arguments as clearly as possible. And in Alabama, the place where we can take cases and win, and we want to, is again, discrimination. I used to live in West Virginia, right? Like, and there are plenty of people I know who would tell me, I can't talk about what I believe or I don't believe at work because I could get fired, right? I know people whose bosses threatened them and said, hey, I heard you're an atheist and that better not come out, or that better not be true, or I'm going to have to let you go. And the truth is, civil rights law applies in Alabama like it does everywhere else, right? If it would be discrimination to do it to a Jewish person, it's discrimination to do it to you too. So those are the places where we can make some inroads if we start getting really good at contesting all the violations we know are happening under the radar in those states.
Yeah. No, totally. And so you mentioned that what's important is for there to be like a sort of a public demonstration or a public pushback on some of these cases of discrimination or whatnot. What's the best way for us to do that? Like to publicly do that, other than of course challenging in court.
Challenging it in court, one thing that I'll say that is more effective than most people think, it is really effective to write and call your legislators, and I'll tell you why. It's not that your congressman is sitting down reading every single thing you send him, but every single thing you send to a congressional office gets read by a staff member and gets tallied up. And the head of staff will see, all of the the tallies of all the communications they're getting. And if there's something they hear a lot about, the member is going to hear about it. And, these people want to get reelected. They don't want to piss a bunch of people in their district off, and they really don't want to have people going up to their town halls and yelling at them. And so if 100 people send messages to their member of Congress saying, there's this church-state separation violation I disagree with. For instance, we're getting people all around the country. Our lobbying team is getting people to send in messages and meet with their legislators right now to rally against the private school subsidies that are in the reconciliation bill right now that would give rich people a $4 billion tax break. So take $4 billion of our tax money, give it to rich people so that they can make donations to send kids to religious private schools. And so the AHA runs lots of campaigns where we tell people on our list, hey, we've got this form. If you fill it out, it'll take you 90 seconds and it'll send it to your member of Congress and your 2 senators. And we've had twice as many people use that form this year than did in the same period last year. So people are stepping up. We're seeing the provision about giveaways to charter schools is still in the Senate bill, but it went down from the original proposal by $6 billion. So that means a lot of the work that we are doing is working. And so what I'd say is, if you want to know small things that you can do to help that will actually make a big difference, but that you can do from your own home, take 90 seconds, go to AmericanHumanist.org, sign up for our email list. It's free. You don't have to pay to join the email list, but we will keep you in the loop about specific things that you can do. Again, you don't need to talk to anyone. You could do it in your pajamas. It will take you less than 2 minutes. But when we get a high volume of contacts to legislator offices, it means a lot and it works.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this reminds me a lot of what my wife KC and I did down at Free Flow, because we set up on the it was on the literature table that was outside the sponsorship room there at Free Flow, and we had the pink index cards where people could write a message to Trump about firing him. I mean, obviously that's not getting through to Trump, but like if you were to do something similar to that, but for your local congressman or something like that, or your local legislator, you're saying that that could have a profound effect.
It can have an effect. It has every single person who does it, the message is read and it is tracked. And so if enough people do it, again, you remember Congress is going to hear, there are a lot of people in this part of Alabama that are really fired up about this giveaway to private schools. And, maybe we should just quietly slip it out of the bill. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, here's the thing, right? I grew up around politics. A lot of politicians are very scared of their voters, and they try to pretend that they're not, and they try to do things to erect barriers around the political process to make it harder for everyday people to get what they want. But we still have the power, and they are scared of us. And so if we make our displeasure, if we make our anger known, oftentimes, can you get someone to change their core beliefs or switch their party by doing that? No, not always. Can you get someone to say, you know what, this really isn't worth it, and I'm not gonna risk my career over this. I'm gonna focus on something else. You even see Trump doing this. Remember when there was that 24-hour period where Elon suspended all payments to anything, and people were worried they weren't going to get their Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security? Everyone around the country freaked out, and they pulled back right away. Even Trump is responsive to public outcry because he is scared of people. He is scared of the power. And so I know there are tons of let's not forget, hear these messages on social media being like, everything's screwed up, there's nothing we can do, our voice doesn't matter. And we forget that these companies are owned by the same right-wing billionaires that run the government right now, right? Like, you are getting propaganda sent to you that says you have no voice precisely because they are terrified. Frederick Douglass, who was a humanist, always said free speech is the dread of tyrants, and that is the right they try to take away first, because they know it is the only thing that can topple them.
Yeah, totally agree about that. And as far as these religious charter schools and everything like that, and I guess just on the topic of in general, because we've mentioned it a couple times, this whole idea of religion providing morality and all this other stuff, and then wanting to push that kind of idea. I don't know. I find that to be incredibly ignorant of Christian doctrine. Like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but like, it seems to be pretty ignorant of like the entire history of Christianity, and it seems like they're trying to whitewash like a lot of the Christian history.
It's condescending bullshit. Well, look, my path to humanism, right? I was raised a humanist, but my path to like care about humanism professionally is like, I spent my like time in higher ed at Harvard and Yale studying the psychology of morality. And that's where I learned about the works of the humanist psychologists like John Dewey and Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, who literally like they invented modern psychotherapy. And all of the psychological research that's come out in the last decade is really clear. Yet, like, religious people are no more moral than non-religious people. In fact, there are some studies that show atheists vote and volunteer and give to charity at higher rates than religious people do. Now, again, I don't think believing in God or not believing in God makes you any more good or bad. What I know for damn sure, what is true every single time we test it, is that people do not become good because of shame or threats of punishment. That never works. That never works. People become good because of the expectations their community has of them, because of what the people they care about and look up to model to them, because they become good through experience when they see how their actions impact others. People are good because we're biologically wired to want to protect our families and want to build reciprocal bonds with people around us. There are a lot of things that make people good, right? But a book telling you how to behave or threats of a fiery afterlife after you die, those are not the things that make people good. plenty of religious people are good. What I would argue is they're good because they have a community of people that they care about, that they go and see every week, that has common values, right? The thing that makes, my Christian friends good people, I think, is not because, and I think it's condescending to them to say, oh, well, they're only good because of the Bible, or they're only good because God told them to. I think they're good people because they care about wanting to make their families proud, or their communities, the people they see at church, they want to be decent to those people and make them proud. That is what makes people good, not religion. And I think and I think most people believe that too, because most people know that there are decent atheists in the world. That's why we need to do a really good job of reminding people that, again, people like Albert Einstein and Marie Curie and people like that were on our team.
Yeah, totally. And then before we move on to our last SCOTUS case, just I guess maybe a quick question, because we were talking about, religious charter schools and pushing religion into schools and morality and everything. Do you think that the religious rights attempts to get the 10 Commandments like put in schools all across the United States, do you think that's going to succeed this time?
It's a good question. I really don't know how the Supreme Court will rule on that. I do think they want it to be challenged and go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I hope I think they're probably hoping the Supreme Court will rule in their favor. I don't know if the Supreme Court will, because I think the Supreme Court has been focused on what I think is a very faulty doctrine, but a doctrine that says, look, we have to see, like, you basically, you have to follow the historical precedent. If it was done at the time of the founders, it's probably allowed. If not, it's not allowed. I don't think at the time of you didn't see the founders going around citing the 10 Commandments all the time. The 10 Commandments are not the preamble to the Constitution. They're not listed in the Declaration of Independence. I think, I don't know if their case is as strong as they think it is, but I absolutely think they're looking for a favorable legal ruling on it. Now, I don't know. The 10 Commandments in schools, to me, there's something really nasty about the idea that we are going to display a religious document from one religion in schools, especially when these are commandments that these people don't follow, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. The party led by Donald Trump is going to say that it's their divine right to put a list of 10 commandments in schools, of which Donald Trump has broken like half. It's absurdity at its finest, but they're going to keep trying to push it. And again, the thing that's going to stop them from pushing it is if we make clear there is a high political cost to it, because there are a ton of people who may say, oh yeah, like, I think the 10 Commandments are like, thou shalt not kill. That's pretty good for kids. But there are a lot of people who will also say, why are people wasting their time on this? Because my groceries cost too much. And like, what are people doing about that? Why are they trying to teach religion to kids in school?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that sentiment, because I feel like, the people that are wanting to push the 10 Commandments into schools and religion and religious thought into schools, they're really just looking to try to control people through religion and to normalize like the forcing of religion into the public space. That seems to be the only thing, and I don't think that helps anybody. Now, moving on to our last SCOTUS case that we're going to discuss today, and that's I'm not sure how to pronounce Mahmoud v. Taylor.
Yeah.
I was just going to get you to kind of explain it a little bit, like what's going on with that particular decision.
So basically, this comes from Montgomery County, Maryland, where I used to live up until 2 years ago. And the issue at hand is you've got a group of religious parents from different religions suing the school system. So Taylor is the superintendent of the school system, and saying we should be allowed to opt our kids out of reading books that have gay characters. Like, this is the books at issue. So what happened was in 2022, Montgomery County Public Schools said, okay, we're gonna pick a set of books that are like age appropriate but have gay characters in them, and we're going to put them in the elementary school classrooms as an optional supplement to the curriculum that teachers can use, right? And these books, I used to be a kindergarten teacher. Some of these books I read to my kids, right? These are very sweet books. There's a book about like two gay hamsters who get married. I don't even know, right? It's like they don't even kiss. The hamsters don't even kiss in the book. It's like it's the most chaste, gentle depictions of gay relationships that are exactly the same as the way straight relationships are depicted in children's books. The characters just happen to be two men or two women, right? It's books about books about like a kid with two dads. And these religious parents said, it is a violation of my religious freedom for you not to provide me an opportunity to opt my kid out of being read this book in class that has gay characters. Basically, their argument is it is a violation of my religion for my kid to learn anything my religion does not agree with. Which, if we accept that as a principle, is going to make it impossible to operate a public school. I mean, you could have a religion that doesn't believe in anything, that thinks 2 + 2 is 5. And what? Now you've got parents being able to opt kids out of math classes. You've got parents who can decide, display a religious objection to any book in the classroom and it has to get taken out. Like, what's going to happen in practice? Because as a teacher, when you're working in an overcrowded classroom with kids, it's impossible to have them leaving and coming back. Who's going to watch them when they leave? What's going to happen is the principal is going to say to the teacher, look, we can't deal with kids coming in and out of your class all the time. You're just going to have to take the book off the curriculum, which is what they want. They want to create a heckler's veto where they say, oh, we don't agree with this. It's against our religion. And then it has to get taken out of the curriculum because it's too inconvenient to constantly operate like a Domino's pizza and cater to the religious preferences of every single person in school. My belief is that, look, public schools are not designed to reinforce your religious beliefs. You teach your religious beliefs at home. But if you believe in young earth creationism, if you think the earth is 6,000 years old, it's not public school's job to teach that. Just like if you believe 2 + 2 is 5, it's not public school's job to teach that. If you believe communism is good, it's not public school's job to teach that. Parents can believe whatever they want. They can teach it to their kids at home. But when you come to school, you're not there to only learn things that are concordant with your family's religion. You're there to learn facts. You're there to learn things that prepare you to compete in a global economy. And by the way, it matters. The state has a compelling interest to make sure kids can treat other people of different backgrounds of all kinds with respect, not only because it makes the school safer, right? We know that kids who get exposed to positive messages about LGBTQ people bully their LGBTQ peers less. But also, these kids are going to grow up. They're going to have to go out into the world. They're going to have to work. They're going to have clients or customers or coworkers who are queer, and they're going to have to know how to interact with them respectfully, or they're not going to have a job for very long. And that is, if the parent wants to teach something counter to that at home, whatever, that's their business. Parents should be allowed to tell their kids whatever kind of nonsense they want. You want to tell your kid the sky is purple? I don't care, right? That's not my job to intervene in your parenting, and sure shit, not the government's job. But you don't get the expectation that a teacher is not going to tell your kid the sky is blue because you believe it's purple, especially because that kid is going to have to go out and operate in a world where everyone else believes the sky is blue. And you don't get to disadvantage your kid like that, because ultimately that puts us at a competitive disadvantage as a country when we have people who can't operate in a global economy because their parents would prefer that they live under rocks.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it more, and I think that I might be able to be swayed away from your position there. I mean, can you imagine a public school that is full of dudists that are all walking around in sunglasses and bathrobes, and they've got their little rugs that really pull the room together, and everything is just your opinion, man? I mean, I feel like that could be a worthwhile learning environment for public school kids. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic.
No. Yeah, I mean, there are some people who say to me, "Hey, we should open humanist private schools." I don't know. I just, and maybe this is a personal thing to me. I really deeply believe that everyone has the right to decide for themselves what they believe, and that includes kids, right? I personally think, parents should have the right to do what they want, but I think the right thing to do is give your kids exposure to a lot of different religious beliefs and let them decide for themselves. But what we don't want, what I think can't happen, again, is the government telling your kids what to believe with your tax money, or having schools that functionally can't teach anything because they're not allowed to ever teach something that contradicts with the family's religious beliefs.
Yeah. No, I'm in total agreement with you, obviously. I was trying to just be absurd about it. Which, yeah, which made me think, like, normally whenever I'm in conversations, and because I do consider myself a secular humanist, I'm very humanist minded. But do you think that in these cases, like in cases of like really ridiculous things, like the being offended by LGBTQ couples in books or whatnot, do you think that doing like reductio ad absurdums, like in response to kind of highlight how ridiculous people are being, would you consider that to be like anti-humanist in any kind of way? Like, it's not necessarily making fun of the person or anything, but it is pointing out how ridiculous that person is being.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Humanism asks us to see every person as worthy of dignity. I don't think that means you can't make fun of people's dumb ideas. Like, I think we have to. I think let's take this guy Mahmoud, who's suing the school district, right? Like, I think he has the same right as I do to live safely, not in fear because of his beliefs, to be treated like a decent human being, to have a decent job, and be able to put a roof over his head. But I do think it's kind of silly that he thinks it's against his religion to read a book that I used to read to my kid, for his kid to read a book that I used to read to my kindergarten kids about like a little girl who's worried she's not going to have as much time to hang out with her uncle, that now that he's getting married and he happens to be getting married to another guy, right? Like, that's absurd. And we're allowed to say that things are absurd, right? Like, ultimately, yeah, humanists have a view of humanity that says people are inherently good and they're capable, but also we're realists. People are fallible, right? You can be good at your core and do bad things. You can be capable of really great things, but be wrong, right? And this is true of all of us. I'm wrong all the time, right? I make morally wrong decisions all the time. None of us are perfect. Part of humanism is that we want and we care about the development of every individual person to their fullest. That means, you got to be tough on yourself sometimes. It's okay to criticize other people. And especially when someone is trying to do something that suppresses other people's right to flourish, it is okay to call that out for the bullshit that it is. Because again, look, if this guy Mahmoud really like is like, oh, being gay is not for me, that's fine. Okay, don't be gay. But you don't get to tell other people's kids like that your particular restrictive dumbass views on gay people, and you don't get to restrict them from learning that there are different kinds of people in the world. It's absurd.
I totally agree with that. But apparently, according to my notes here, the parents in this particular case that are being represented by the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, which I have to say, any like organization or fund or anything like that has religious liberty in it is not really concerned about religious liberty.
You want to
in
know
particular.
the first witness that was called at the Religious Liberty Commission meeting was a guy with the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty. I mean, these people are just like, the Beckett Fund is one of the like craziest right-wing groups, and they represent people outside of Christianity, but their feeling is basically, if you have a religious belief, the government shouldn't be allowed to tell you what to do. Like, you don't want to vaccinate your kids, you don't want to hire gay people, you don't like whatever. You shouldn't have to follow any law unless if your religion contradicts it. So yeah, there's like the Beckett Fund, there's the ACLJ, there's the ADF, there's like a small number of like very well-funded religious groups that are on the opposite side of us or FFRF on all these pieces of legislation or on all these legal cases.
Yeah. And so what I was getting to is that they've petitioned the Supreme Court to review this case back in September. Now, I'm kind of curious, what do you think what do you think the Supreme Court would rule on it, considering its composition now? And then what effect could this have in the future if they do take it up in general?
So if the Supreme Court has taken up the case and they're going to give us a decision on it in the next couple weeks. And our worry is that, candidly, is that this Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of the families. And what that's going to mean is, functionally, it is going to make it harder for public schools to teach anything that the religious right might object to, because people are going to have a right to pull their kids out of the classroom whenever they can find an objection to something. That is going to wreak havoc on, like, I don't know, you know, it's hard to be a teacher. It's going to wreak havoc on the operation of a classroom if you have kids coming in and out whenever mom or dad might disagree with something. And you've got, you know, what that's going to mean in practice is it's going to make it way harder to teach any content about LGBTQ. And again, these books were not about, like, hey kids, like, let's talk about what it means to be gay. They were just regular stories where, like, two of the characters happened to be, you know, you could sub the gay characters out for straight characters and these stories wouldn't change. The only thing they object to is gay people being portrayed as decent, like, participants in society. It's the very existence of LGBTQ people that they're objecting to. And so functionally, you're going to create a climate where it's impossible. It may be hard to do, like, anti-bullying assemblies that talk about, like, different kinds of diversity in LGBTQ kids. You might have people pulling their kids out of lessons about people like Harvey Milk, right? Or like American leaders who happen to be gay. And, you know, I saw Caitlin in the chat, if they have a fucking problem, they should just pull their kids out of school. I agree. Like, if you are a parent on the religious right and you don't want your kids to be exposed to anything you disagree with ever, you know what? You can pull your kids out of school and homeschool them, or you can send them to private school. I mean, shit, I think American history is, like, whitewashed nonsense, and I would prefer my kids be read, like, Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. But, like, you know, if I want that, like, I don't get to just go up to the public school and demand they read my kids all of my favorite books. I can do that at home. That's my job as a parent.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's totally ridiculous that they are, you know, that so many places have sort of, which I know that the school and legal system is a little bit different, but, like, so much of our society has just basically reversed course, like, on a lot of the progress that's been made on the LGBTQ plus front. And it's kind of crazy how quickly that just seemed to crumble for some organizations, for some corporations out there. It's really ridiculous. And it's almost like they're like, oh, well, if we don't tell kids that being gay exists, then they just won't be gay, or something like that. It's really fucking stupid.
Their whole rationale, to them, the worst thing that could happen is that their kid is gay or trans. That's the worst thing that could happen to their kid. And they believe, they know that if schools make clear that gay people are an accepted part of our society and it's okay to be gay, that's going to undermine the message they're sending at home, which is, you better not be gay or else, because no one likes and no one tolerates gay people. Like, we know that kids are more likely to feel safe and come out in an environment where they understand that they're going to be loved and accepted for who they are no matter what. And this terrifies the religious right. The idea of acceptance itself terrifies the religious right, because the lack of acceptance is the only thing they have to enforce the rigid control that they insist on. It's why we have to fight against this so hard, because ultimately you've got people whose number one priority is to make life a living hell for their gay and trans kids. And it is important that we, as not just as secular people who want to, like, fight the religious right on everything, but as humanists who believe every person has a right to develop into their natural selves. Like, that's why we need to fight this as hard as we can. And they're in a stronger legal position than they've been in a long time. But the truth is, like, most Americans don't want to go back to a world where gay people weren't allowed to get married. And the more they understand that these people are trying to turn back the clock, they're going to be like, wait a minute. No, like, we're not going back to 1984. We're done with this.
Yeah. It's so sad. And while you were talking about all that, I was just thinking about how the concern for the protection of kids just seems to be a shield, because I feel like one of the biggest threats to children today is the conservative party, in my opinion, because of the fact that you have so many conservatives out there. Like every week, there's like 10 to 15 reports of conservatives, specifically conservatives, that are being caught with like, child porn or like abusing kids. I mean, like this week alone, there was that state representative, I believe it was in like South Carolina, that was apparently sharing child porn via the Joe Biden 69 or whatever thing on whatever app. And so like, it just seems like they're trying to use children as a shield, as a tool in order to enact like their political agendas.
Yeah, let's talk about this, and then I have to go. Every accusation is confirmation with these fucking people. Like, let's be real about, like, I used to be a teacher, right? Like, and I came directly to the AHA from being an executive at a tech startup that worked in child mental health. There is no one who cares about child safety less than the right, and yet they beat as a cudgel on it all the time. You know what people, like, there is nothing more important than preventing children from sexual abuse. You know what experts recommend is important to prevent kids from sexual abuse? Number one, comprehensive sex education. Kids need to understand their bodies so they can understand when something bad is happening to them. Number two, encouraging kids to report when an adult does something bad to them. If you teach a kid to unquestioningly accept the authority of an adult every time, even when something makes them uncomfortable, they're going to be less likely to resist and report abuse. Number three, you can't have kids who feel shamed and isolated and alone, especially because of their gender, or they're going to be more vulnerable to predators, right? Like, we know the behavior of child sexual predators is that they prey on kids who feel ashamed and are isolated and alone. And you want to know what the fucking number one wish list is for the right wing in public schools? Get rid of sex education. Like, enforce a standard of unquestioning obedience for kids and make LGBTQ kids feel isolated and ashamed because of their sexuality, and reduce any attempts to make them feel more integrated, more welcome, more supported. Their agenda is a child sex abuser's wish list. And we don't talk about this enough, right? Like, we don't talk about the fact that they are the real groomers, and the policies they're promoting are the ones that make kids less safe and lead to the worst thing that any of us could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, thank you so much, Fish, for coming in today and kind of going through these SCOTUS decisions that are going to be coming down. I really appreciate you sticking with me for so long today. I hope that we can have you on in the future whenever some new developments come up. But do you want to let everybody know like where they can find you and how to contact you if they need to contact either you or the AHA?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say thank you for having me on, man. It's been a lot of fun. I would do it anytime. It was great to meet your crew. And Godless Engineer fans, if you are interested in learning more about how to get involved with the AHA's legislative, legal work, learning more about humanism, go to AmericanHumanist.org. You can sign up for our free email newsletters. You can read our online magazine. You can join our Discord if you want to become a member and get our print magazine and support the work we're doing. You can do that. But two things that are really important. Never forget that they are not allowed to discriminate against us. And if you hear about discrimination against someone because of their non-theism, atheism, humanism, report it to us because we may be able to help. And number two, there is nothing more important we can do than use our voices to advocate state, local, federal level to our legislators for what we want. And the AHA has tools on priority issues to non-religious people where you can send messages to 3 members of Congress in under 90 seconds. So head to AmericanHumanist.org if you want to take action. We are here to support you. If you want to get in touch with me personally, fstark@AmericanHumanist.org is my email. And I may be able to help you, or we've got 17 people on our team. I can send you to somebody who can.
Yeah, and I did, my wife just handed me a note. Apparently, there's an AHA conference at the end of July. Is that correct?
There is. So actually, this is a good point. Anyone who is in the Chicagoland area, we are having a conference on next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to be giving out our
end of June.
Yeah, end of June. Yeah, so it's next weekend. We're going to be giving out our Humanist of the Year award, which is, it's gone to everyone from like Anthony Fauci to Jonas Salk to Bill Nye the Science Guy. We're giving it this year to Jelani Cobb, who is a journalist and a dean of the Columbia Journalism School. And you're going to hear presentations from everyone from secular content creators. Drew McCoy is going to be there. You're going to hear from our legislative and legal team about the work they're doing. You're going to hear about like, what's the humanist point of view on what democracy should look like going forward, what human relationship should look like in the age of AI and dating apps. Like, how do we better measure human happiness? And so if you want to be in a room with like-minded people and hear about some of the biggest ideas in humanism, we'll see you in Chicago next weekend.
Yeah, and just so you know, this year is the first year where I'm actually speaking at a number of like conferences and at like the ARC protests. So just, you know, big wink, wink. You know, maybe in the future or something. I don't know.
Dude,
if I could.
Love that.
Yeah, and then apparently there's an AHA speaker at NanoCon at the end of July. Is that correct?
So Candace Gorham, who is our board chairwoman, my boss, is going to be speaking at NanoCon at the end of July. So if you're going to be there, Candace is amazing. She's a former ordained minister and therapist who left religion and has written great books, including the Ebony Exodus Project, about why other Black folks like her are leaving religion. And so she's an incredible speaker, really brilliant, a good person to stop by and meet. And we're really glad to be representing there as well.
Awesome.
And then I'll also be at the regular conference in July.
Awesome. That's great. There's so much good shit that's going on this summer. And I wish that I could be at all of it, but like we've got to pick and choose.
I feel.
Yeah. Which I'm actually going to be on a panel at NanoCon as well. So I'll definitely be seeing her there. Candace. Yeah, Candace. I'll be seeing her there and I'll definitely name drop you.
I'll let her know to look out for you when I see her next week. Well, thank you for having me on. It was good to meet everyone. And like, yeah, just so much fun hanging out. And I'll hope to be back on soon.
Yes, definitely. And thank you again for staying so long. Everybody in the chat, please go down below. There's I'm going to have links down to the AHA down there. So definitely check them out on all the social medias. And Fish, again, thank you so much for stopping by. Everybody, don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.